Where the hell were you, you nonentity? My family has been sitting here waiting for an hour, and the table still isn't ready.
My husband's words cracked through the living room like a whip. 30 people fell into absolute silence, 30 pairs of eyes locked on me. New Year's music was still playing softly in the background, but no one spoke, no one laughed, no one seemed to breathe. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from. It matters to us to know how far our stories travel. My daughter-in-law dropped her champagne glass. The liquid spilled across the tablecloth I myself had ironed that morning. I stood in the doorway of my own home, grocery bags still hanging from my arms. I had just rushed back from a last-minute emergency run because we were missing ice, wine, and the shrimp his sister had specifically demanded. I had driven like a madwoman all over the city on New Year's Eve, searching for open stores, while they sat comfortably in my living room, drinking my champagne, waiting for me to serve them as if I were their personal employee. But none of that mattered to Robert Bob Miller. To him I was always to blame for everything. And that night he had decided to humiliate me in front of his entire family on the most important night of the year. His mother, seated in the best armchair in the room like a queen on her throne, nodded approvingly at her son's words. His older sister looked at me with contempt, the same contempt she had perfected over more than 3 decades. My own children lowered their eyes, ashamed, but not one of them said a single word in my defense. Not one. "I told you, Bob," murmured Grandma Eleanor, my mother-in-law, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This woman has never known how to fulfill her obligations." Something broke inside me at that exact moment. It was not my heart. That had broken years ago. It was something else. It was the last thread that kept me tied to the lie that this marriage, this family, was worth any sacrifice. Bob stood up from the table, walked toward me with that look of superiority I knew far too well, and ripped the grocery bags from my hands so roughly that he almost knocked me to the floor. "Useless." He spat the word in my face. 32 years and you still cannot do anything right. I was 63 years old. 32 years of marriage. 3 children I had raised almost entirely on my own. A house I had turned into a home with my own hands. And a family business I had helped build from the ground up. And in that moment, in front of his entire family, my husband was calling me useless. But what Bob didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had come back from more than just the grocery store. I had just left a meeting that would change absolutely everything. A meeting I had kept secret for 6 months. A meeting that would turn that humiliation into the biggest mistake of his life. Because while they saw me as an old servant woman with no options, no power, and no voice, I knew something that would soon make the foundations of everything they took for granted begin to shake. That night, as I served the New Year's dinner with my hands trembling from contained rage, as I listened to their laughter and their toasts in my house, with my money, celebrating at the expense of my dignity, I was smiling inside. Because in exactly 5 days they would discover the truth. And when that happened, every one of those insults, every one of those humiliations, and every one of those looks of contempt would cost them more than they could ever imagine. Before continuing with this story, which still makes me tremble when I remember it, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? Have you lived through something similar? Leave it in the comments because believe me, you are not alone. And if you want to hear real stories like this, stories of women who finally said enough, subscribe to the channel. What comes next will leave you speechless. Leave a like if you have ever felt invisible in your own home. Now let me tell you how all of this began. Because to understand my revenge, you first need to know my hell. My name is Susan Miller. Although, to be honest, I stopped feeling like Susan a long time ago. I became simply Bob's wife, the children's mother, Grandma Eleanor's daughter-in-law. My name, my identity, everything slowly dissolved over the years until nothing was left of the woman I once was. I am 63 years old, even though people always tell me I look older. That isn't a compliment when you know it comes from worry lines, sleepless nights, and tears that age you more than years ever could. I was born in Buffalo, New York, into a humble but dignified family. My father was a carpenter and my mother was a seamstress. They taught me that honest work and devotion to family were the most important values in life. I never imagined that those same values would become the chains that bound me to a life of servitude. I met Bob when I was 31 years old. I was working as an accountant at a textile company in Buffalo, New York. I was independent, had my own apartment and my own dreams. He arrived as the new operations manager, confident, self-assured, with that smile that made me feel special. He courted me for 6 months with flowers, dinners, and promises of a life filled with love and respect. We got married in 1993. It was a simple wedding but beautiful. I remember that day as we danced our first dance, he whispered in my ear, "You are going to be the happiest woman in the world, Susan. I promise you." How quickly promises are forgotten. The first years were good, or at least I want to believe they were. We moved to New York because of a job opportunity for Bob. I left my job, my friendships, and my city because that is what good wives do, right? They sacrifice. They always sacrifice. In 1994, our first son was born, Robert Jr. In 1996, Jennifer arrived. And in 1998, Brandon. 3 pregnancies, 3 births, 3 babies I raised almost entirely on my own while Bob built his career. He worked late, went out on weekends with his partners, traveled constantly, and I stayed home changing diapers, preparing bottles, and singing lullabies at 3 in the morning. "You are very lucky to be able to stay home with the children," Grandma Eleanor used to tell me every time we visited her, as if being trapped within 4 walls, without sleep, without help, and without a single moment for myself, were a privilege and not a sentence. I endured it because that was something they had also taught me. Women endure. Women are strong. Women don't complain. When the children started school, Robert Miller decided to open his own business, an import and distribution company for fabrics. "I need your help, sweetheart," he told me. And I, like the fool I was, thought that at last we would be a team, that at last my work would be valued. I started working like never before. I handled all the accounting, managed the suppliers, organized the inventory, and resolved legal and tax problems. All of that while I continued being a full-time mother, cook, homemaker, and nurse whenever someone got sick. The business grew. In 5 years, we went from a small shop in downtown New York to having 3 warehouses and more than 20 employees. I worked 12, 14 hours a day. I dropped the children off at school at 7 in the morning, went to the office, solved 1,000 problems, picked the children up at 2, prepared their lunch, helped them with homework, took them to their activities, returned home, prepared dinner, cleaned, and when everyone was asleep, I stayed until 2 or 3 in the morning finishing the accounting at the dining room table. And do you know how I appeared on the business paperwork? As an administrative assistant. Not even as a partner. The company was in the name of Bob and his mother, Grandma Eleanor. She had put up the initial money, $10,000, and she never got tired of reminding us every time she saw us. "Thanks to me, you have this business. Without my money, you would be nothing." She repeated it again and again. $10,000. That was what she had invested. I had invested 15 years of my life, my knowledge, my health, my sleepless nights, but that didn't count. The years passed and things got worse. Robert Miller began arriving home later and later. He smelled of a perfume that was not mine. Charges appeared on the credit cards that he could not explain. But when I asked, he exploded. "Now you are going to control me after everything I do for this family?" he shouted. "After giving you this house, this life. That house, as if I had not paid every single cent of the mortgage with my work in the business. That life, as if I had not built it with my own hands." And then the insults began. At first they were subtle, comments disguised as jokes. "Susan is really letting herself go, right?" he said in front of his sisters. "She is no longer the woman I married." Then they became more direct. "You're fat. You look old. You are not even good for this." And finally they became cruel. Words that I am not going to repeat because they still hurt me deep inside. My children grew up seeing all of that. Seeing their father treat me like trash. Seeing their grandmother and their aunts speak to me with contempt. And slowly, painfully, they also learned that this was the correct way to treat me. Robert Jr. married a woman named Tiffany, a girl with money who from the very first day looked at me as if I were the maid. And my son allowed her to treat me that way. More than that, he himself began to speak to me in that same condescending tone. "Mom, why don't you prepare more food when we come? Tiffany says your seasoning is very bland. Mom, when you take care of the children, please don't give them so much sugar. Tiffany has a very specific nutrition plan. Mom, could you not wear that perfume when you come to our house? Tiffany gets headaches. Jennifer, my only daughter, the girl I had carried on my chest, who had cried in my arms, who had come to me with every problem, every disappointment, and every joy, got married and moved to Los Angeles. We spoke once a month at most. She was too busy with her new life. Too busy for her mother. And Brandon, my baby, became an exact copy of his father. Cold, distant, critical. At 25 years old, he was still living in our house without paying rent, without helping with anything, expecting me to wash his clothes, prepare his food, and clean his room. The business kept growing. Bob opened a fourth warehouse, bought new trucks, hired more staff. And I was still there, working in the shadows, making everything function without a single word of recognition, without an official salary, without anything. When I turned 60, I thought that maybe things would change. Maybe Bob would finally see me. Maybe he would value me. I organized my own party. I paid for the venue, hired the catering service, bought my own cake. His entire family came. They ate, they drank, they had fun. No one gave me a gift. Not a single one. Bob stood up at the end of the night to make a toast. I thought that maybe, just maybe, he would say something nice. Something that acknowledged everything I had done for Susan. I want to make a toast, he said, raising his glass, because after 30 years she finally learned how to organize a decent party. Everyone laughed. Everyone toasted. And I smiled because that was what was expected of me. To smile. Always smile. That night, lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that something had to change. I could not keep living like this. I didn't want to anymore. 3 months later, my father died. He left me a small inheritance. The little house in Buffalo, New York, where I grew up, and some savings he had kept his entire life. It was not much, but it was mine. Only mine. And that changed everything. Because with that money, with that house, with that small independence, I began to wake up. I began to remember who Susan Miller was before becoming the shadow of Robert Miller. I began to ask questions. To review documents. To investigate. To plan. And what I discovered during those 6 months of silent investigation left me frozen to the bone. But there were still 3 months left until New Year's. 3 months to finish putting all the pieces in place. 3 months for Bob to make the biggest mistake of his life by insulting me in front of his entire family. Because you see, while they saw me as an exhausted woman without options, without power, and without a future, I was building my escape. I was documenting. I was preparing. I was waiting for the perfect moment. And that moment arrived on New Year's Eve, when Bob called me a bitch in front of 30 people in my own house. The months following my father's death were revealing in ways I never imagined. I began to notice things I had ignored before, or that maybe I simply didn't want to see. Bob didn't even bother hiding his contempt anymore. The insults became part of our daily routine, like saying good morning or good night. One Tuesday morning we were having breakfast when I mentioned that I needed money to repair the washing machine. He laughed in my face. And what do you think I give you a roof and food for? Use your father's inheritance if you are so proud of it. I had never bragged about anything. I had not even told him the exact amount. But for him, the simple fact that I had something of my own was already a threat. His family got worse as well. Grandma Eleanor, my mother-in-law, started showing up at my house without warning, as if she were the owner. She opened my refrigerator, criticized my food, checked my cleaning as if she were an inspector. This house is a complete mess, Susan. I don't know how Bob puts up with living like this. A mess. My house, where every piece of furniture was in its place, where the floors shone, where the towels were always clean and folded. But for her it was never enough. Never would be. Bob's sisters, Aunt Linda and Aunt Patty, started organizing family gatherings without inviting me. They met with their children, with Bob, with Grandma Eleanor. They posted the photos on Facebook. I found out through social media that my own family had gone out to eat, had gone to the movies, had celebrated a birthday. When I confronted Bob, his response was devastating. It is just that you are so boring, Susan. Nobody wants to be around you. You only know how to complain and ruin the moment. I, who had organized every birthday, every Christmas, every celebration for 30 years. I, who had stayed up late baking cakes, decorating and cooking for 20 people. Now I was the boring one. The one who ruined everything. But the worst didn't come from Bob or from his family. The worst came from my own children. Robert Jr. and Tiffany had twins in March. Beautiful babies who should have been my joy. Tiffany made the rules very clear to me from the hospital. Susan, you can visit them on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. Nothing more. I need privacy and routine with my babies. And please, let me know one day in advance so I can prepare the house. Prepare the house. As if I were a stranger. As if I were not the grandmother. When I protested, Robert Jr. cut me off sharply on the phone. His voice was identical to his father's. That cold, authoritative tone I knew far too well. Mom, these are Tiffany's rules. Either you follow them or you don't see the children. It is that simple. That simple. My grandchildren used as blackmail. As a weapon. Jennifer from Los Angeles was different but not better. She pretended. She called me every 3 weeks. 10-minute conversations in which she talked non-stop about her wonderful life, her wonderful husband, her wonderful job. When I tried to tell her something, anything, she interrupted me. Oh, Mom, what a shame, but I have to hang up. I have a meeting. We will talk soon. She never visited me. When I suggested going to see her, there were always excuses. She was remodeling. She had too much work. The house was very small. Maybe next month. That next month never came. And Brandon, my baby who lived under my roof, ate my food, used my electricity, my water, my internet. That Brandon who one Saturday morning yelled at me because I had not ironed the shirt he needed. You never do anything right. The only thing you are good for is getting in the way. He was 26 years old. 26. And he spoke to me as if I were his employee. And Bob, sitting in the living room reading the newspaper, said absolutely nothing. Not a single word in my defense. At the business office, things changed as well. Bob hired a new woman, Ashley, as his personal assistant. She was 32 years old, she was pretty, and she was always perfectly made up. She started accompanying him to every meeting, to every business trip. I stayed at the office doing the heavy work while they had dinner in expensive restaurants with clients. The employees started whispering. I pretended not to hear, but I heard everything. The Fridays when Bob left early. The hotels he booked with the corporate cards. The expensive gifts that appeared on the statements. One afternoon in July, I walked into his office without knocking. Ashley was sitting on his desk. Bob had his hand on her shoulder. They pulled away quickly when they saw me, but it was already too late. I had already seen enough. That night I asked him directly, "Are you sleeping with her?" Bob didn't even deny it. He looked at me with those cold eyes I no longer recognized and said something that still burns inside me. "And what if I am? Look at yourself. Look at yourself carefully. Do you think a man like me can settle for a bitter old woman like you?" I was left without air. Literally without air. 32 years together reduced to that. I was old. Bitter. Insufficient. 2 weeks later I discovered something worse. Brandon asked to borrow my laptop because his had broken down. When he gave it back to me, he forgot to log out of his email account, and I, for the first time in my life, did something I never thought I would do. I read his emails. There was a conversation between him, Robert Jr. and Jennifer. The subject line said, "Mom problem." Robert Jr. had written, "She is already unbearable. Always with her martyr face, making us feel guilty. Tiffany no longer wants her in the house." Jennifer replied, "I cannot stand her either. Every time we talk it is pure drama. We should convince Dad to put her in a nursing home or something like that." And Brandon, my baby, my youngest son, wrote, "I completely agree. She is so bitter she contaminates everything. Besides, Dad could live his life with someone who makes him happy. My own children. My 3 children. Planning to get rid of me as if I were garbage." I cried that night until I had no tears left. But after the tears came something different. Clarity came. Anger came. Determination came. Because while I was reading those emails, I remembered something. I remembered that the business, those 4 warehouses that were now worth millions of dollars, had been built with my work. I remembered that the house where everyone lived comfortably was also in my name because we had bought it with a joint loan. I remembered that I had access to all the bank accounts, to all the legal documents, to all the contracts. And I remembered something else. Something I had discovered 3 weeks earlier while reviewing old business files. Something Bob thought no one knew. Something that could destroy him completely. For years, Bob had been diverting money from the business. Fake invoices. Non-existent suppliers. Secret accounts. Millions of dollars hidden in tax havens. And everything was documented in files I had found by accident, inside an old box stored in the warehouse. At that moment I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was not going to beg anymore. I was not going to wait for them to value me. I was going to take what was mine. I was going to expose what they had hidden. I was going to walk away from this with my head held high. I hired a lawyer in secret. Not just any lawyer. The best family and tax lawyer in New York. I showed him all the documents and he confirmed what I already suspected. Robert Miller was committing serious tax fraud. And I, as a de facto partner in the business, even though I didn't appear on the paperwork, had the right to half of everything. I opened a new bank account in my own name. I began to transfer discreetly small amounts of money from our joint accounts. Nothing that would raise suspicion. $200 here. $300 there. In 3 months, I had gathered almost $25,000. I hired a forensic accountant who examined the business finances under a microscope. We documented every irregularity, every fake invoice, every dollar diverted. And I waited. I waited for the perfect moment to act. September, October, November. The insults continued. The contempt continued. But I no longer cried. I smiled. I nodded. I continued playing the role of the submissive wife while inside I was building my arsenal. And then December arrived. Bob decided that we would have the New Year's dinner at our house. He invited his entire family, 30 people. "You had better not make us look bad, Susan," he warned me a week earlier. "I want this dinner to be perfect, and don't even think about complaining about the work. It is the least you can do after everything I have given you." I simply nodded. But inside I was counting the days because on January 5th I had a meeting scheduled with the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. A meeting in which I would hand over all the documents of Bob's tax fraud. And on January 6th, my lawyer would file the most devastating divorce lawsuit that man could ever have imagined. But before that, I had to endure one last humiliation. One last dinner. One last night pretending to be the perfect wife. I didn't know that that humiliation would come in the cruelest way. I didn't know that Bob would call me a bitch in front of his entire family. But when he did, when I heard that word come out of his mouth, I knew the universe was giving me the perfect gift. The perfect justification. The perfect reason to destroy him without a shred of guilt. That New Year's night, after serving dinner, after washing the dishes, after seeing off the last guest who left my house at 3 in the morning without even thanking me, I sat alone in the kitchen. Bob had gone to bed without saying a word to me. Brandon was in his room. The house was silent. And I, with my hands wrinkled from the hot dishwater, took my phone and wrote a message to my lawyer, Mr. Davis. "Go ahead with everything. Starting tomorrow." His reply arrived in less than a minute. "Understood. Get ready. This is going to change your life." I went to sleep in the guest room. I had not even shared a bedroom with Bob for 2 years. He had never protested. He was probably happy not to have to see me. But that early morning, lying in that bed, I didn't feel sadness. I felt something I had not felt in decades. I felt power. Because what Bob didn't know, what none of them knew, was that during those last 6 months I had not only been documenting his tax fraud. I had been building something much bigger. Let me tell you the complete truth. The truth that would change absolutely everything. When my father died and left me his little house in Buffalo, New York, he also left me something else. Something I discovered when I went to review his documents with the notary. My father, that humble carpenter whom everyone believed barely had enough to survive, had owned 3 plots of land in an area that was now commercial and premium in Buffalo, New York. 3 plots of land that, at current market value, were worth $2 million. $2 million that were completely mine. That Bob didn't know existed. That didn't appear in any joint asset declaration because I had inherited them after our marriage. But that was not all. Do you remember that I told you I handled the business accounting? That I organized everything, managed everything, resolved everything. Well, what Bob never understood is that when you keep a company's books for 20 years, you know exactly where all the bodies are buried. And Bob had many bodies. Over the last 10 years, he had diverted, in total, almost $1,500,000 from the business. Fake invoices to non-existent suppliers, inflated prices on fictitious purchases, money that left the business and ended up in personal accounts registered in tax havens under the names of shell companies. I had copies of everything. Every invoice, every transfer, every document. I had been saving them meticulously for months, without him even suspecting it. And I had discovered something else that left me frozen. The business, those 4 warehouses that Bob boasted as his own, technically didn't belong only to him. When the first company was registered back in the year 2001, I appeared as a partner with 40% of the shares. Bob had 40% and his mother the remaining 20%. Over time, Bob modified the corporate bylaws. He diluted my participation, made me sign documents I didn't read because I trusted him. By the year 2015, according to the official paperwork, I held only 5% of the company. But here is the interesting part. Those changes were never properly registered with the Secretary of State/Business Registry. There were inconsistencies, signatures that didn't match, missing documents. My lawyer confirmed it. Legally, I was still the owner of the original 40% of the company. 40% of a business that was now worth, according to the latest valuations, $5 million. That meant that $2 million of that company were, by law, mine. And Bob had no idea. But there is still more because the universe has mysterious ways of delivering justice. Do you remember Ashley, the young and pretty assistant with whom Bob was having his affair? It turned out that Ashley was not as naive as he believed. She was documenting things as well. And when I contacted her in secret, when I offered her $10,000 for information, she told me everything. She gave me copies of emails in which Bob promised to leave his unbearable old wife to marry her. She gave me photos of the trips they took together, paid for with business money. She gave me receipts for an apartment Bob had rented for their encounters, also paid for with corporate funds. And she gave me the crown jewel, audio recordings in which Bob talked about how he was going to get rid of me, how he was going to leave me with nothing, how he was going to put me in a nursing home and keep everything. I have already talked to my children, Bob said in one of the recordings, while Ashley recorded without him knowing. They all agree. As soon as she signs the new will paperwork, we are going to declare her mentally incompetent. A couple of visits to the right psychiatrist, some diagnoses of senile dementia, and that is it. She gets institutionalized and I manage all her assets. Listening to that recording made me nauseous. But it also gave me something else. It gave me absolute certainty that those people didn't deserve another second of my consideration, not another gram of my guilt. During December, while they planned my destruction, I finished building my perfect escape. I sold the 3 plots of land in Buffalo, New York. $2 million, which I deposited into a bank account in the United States. Completely legal, completely untouchable for Robert Miller. And I hired not 1 but 3 lawyers. 1 specializing in family law, another in tax law, and a 3rd in corporate law. All 3 working in coordination to build the strongest case possible. I made copies of absolutely everything. Documents of tax fraud, evidence of infidelity, audio recordings, emails, bank statements, contracts. Everything stored in 3 different locations. A safety deposit box at the bank, a private storage unit, and digital copies in the cloud. And on January 2nd, 2 days after Bob called me a bitch in my own home, I did something else. I went to the notary and signed the divorce filing my lawyer had prepared. But not just any divorce. A divorce in which I demanded 50% of all marital assets, plus the legitimate 40% of the company, plus compensation for emotional distress, plus spousal support for 32 years of unpaid labor. In total, I was suing for $6 million. On January 3rd, I went to the offices of the IRS with my forensic accountant. We submitted a file of 300 pages documenting every dollar Bob had stolen from the tax authorities. Aggravated tax fraud, organized financial crime, money laundering, crimes that could give him between 5 and 15 years in prison. And on January 4th, One day earlier than originally planned, my lawyer filed the divorce petition in family court. Bob would receive the official notification on January 5th in the morning. At the same time, the tax authorities would knock on the door of his office with an audit warrant. But before that happened, on the night of January 4th, I decided to give him a preview. I arrived home after having supposedly spent the entire day with the doctor, as I had told Bob. He was in the living room watching television, drinking whiskey, probably thinking about Ashley. I sat down in front of him. He looked at me with annoyance. "What do you want now?" I smiled. A calm, serene smile that unsettled him. "I just wanted you to know something, Bob. Tomorrow your life is going to change forever. And not in the way you expect." He laughed. That arrogant laugh I knew so well. "What the hell are you talking about? You have really gone crazy. Tomorrow morning you are going to receive 2 visits. One from the IRS. Another from a family court. I recommend that you have a very good lawyer on speed dial." The smile vanished from his face. "What did you do?" "What I should have done 30 years ago. Wake up." I stood up and went to my room. I left him there, sitting, his face pale, trying to process what he had just heard. That night I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but out of the excitement of knowing that, after 32 years of humiliation, after being invisible, after being mistreated, after being reduced to nothing, I was finally going to reclaim my life. And the best part was that they had no idea what was coming. The morning of January 5th arrived with a bright sun, as if mocking what was about to happen. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, took a long shower, and dressed in my best navy blue tailored suit, the one I had bought years earlier for a wedding and had never worn again. I put on my makeup carefully, styled my hair, looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in years, I recognized the woman looking back at me. Bob was still asleep, or maybe pretending to sleep. I didn't care. I prepared coffee, toast, fruit. I set the table as if it were a normal day. As if my world were not about to explode in their faces. At 7:30 Bob came downstairs. He looked terrible. Deep dark circles, messy hair, a swollen face. He clearly had not slept well after my little warning the night before. "Susan, about what you said yesterday." "Your coffee is ready," I interrupted him with a smile. "I made it the way you like it, strong and without sugar." He sat down at the table, wary, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Maybe, finally, he was beginning to understand that yes, that I was a stranger. A stranger who had lived under his roof for 32 years. At 8:15 the doorbell rang. Bob almost spilled his coffee. I went to open the door. There were 2 men in formal suits. One was carrying a brown folder. The other had an identification badge with the IRS logo clearly visible. "Mr. Robert Miller is right here," I said, pointing to Bob, who was already standing with his face completely white. "Please come in. Would you like some coffee?" The IRS agents didn't want coffee. They handed Bob an official notice. Immediate audit order for Miller Logistics and Supply. Preventive freezing of corporate bank accounts. Requirement to submit all tax documents from the last 10 years. You have 24 hours to present yourself at our offices with your legal representative and all the required documents, said the man with the brown folder. Otherwise, we will proceed with a criminal complaint for alleged tax fraud. Bob looked at me. The fury in his eyes was palpable, but there was something else as well. Fear. The men left. Bob exploded. "What the hell did you do? Did you call them yourself?" "I didn't call anyone, Bob. I simply submitted documents. Documents you created. Invoices you falsified. Transfers you made. I just made sure the appropriate authorities were aware of your creative activities." He tried to move toward me. For a moment I thought he was going to hit me. He never had before, but there was something wild in his eyes. I took a step back and pulled out my phone. "I recommend that you don't do anything stupid, Bob. I have this connected to record directly to the cloud. Anything you do will be documented and automatically sent to my lawyers." He stopped. Fists clenched. Jaw tight. But he stopped. "You are a viper." "No, Bob. I am a woman who finally learned to bite back." The doorbell rang again. Robert Miller and I looked at each other. He knew what was coming. This time it was a court officer from family court. Notification of a divorce lawsuit. A claim for $6 million. A summons for a preliminary hearing in 15 days. Bob read the documents with trembling hands. He turned the pages faster and faster, his eyes jumping from one paragraph to another, his breathing quickening. This is madness. You are completely crazy. You have no right to any of this. I have the right to everything, Bob. And I am going to prove it with documents, with witnesses, with evidence. You are going to discover that the useless old woman knows exactly how the law works. The court officer left. Bob collapsed onto the sofa, the notification still in his hands. Why? His voice came out broken. Why now? Why like this? I sat down in front of him. Calm. Serene. With a peace I had not felt in decades. Why? Are you really asking me why, Bob? 32 years of insults. 32 years of humiliations. 32 years of working like a slave in your business without a single dollar in salary. 32 years of being invisible to you, to your children, to your family. And you ask me why. I gave you everything, this house, this life. You didn't give me anything that I didn't build with my own hands. I paid for this house just as much as you did. I built that business just as much as you did. I raised those children on my own while you were working or sleeping with your assistant. He turned red. How do you know about Ashley? Please, Bob. Everyone knew. The employees, your partners, probably even your mother. The only idiot who thought he was discreet was you. He pulled out his phone and dialed in desperation. I heard the voice of his lawyer on the other end. Mr. O'Reilly, that mediocre attorney who handled his affairs. O'Reilly, I need to see you now. We have a huge problem. My wife, that is suing me for wait. He looked at the papers. For $6 million and the IRS is auditing the company. Yesterday. Right now. Come immediately. While Bob was making his call, I received a message on my phone. It was from Mr. Davis, my lawyer. Everything is in motion. Corporate accounts frozen, audit activated, your lawsuit registered. Now comes the interesting part. That made me smile. Because the plan didn't end there. That was only the first blow. The blow that woke them up, put them on alert, made them react in predictable ways. Because I knew exactly how they would react. Bob would call his children. His children would come running to protect their inheritance. His mother would come to insult me and threaten me. They would all unite against me as always. And that was exactly what I needed them to do. At 11 in the morning, Robert Jr. arrived with Tiffany. They entered the house like a hurricane, without knocking, without greeting. What the hell is going on, Mom? My son shouted. You have gone crazy. You are trying to destroy Dad. I am trying to recover what is mine. Yours. None of this is yours. Dad built that business. Dad bought this house. You were just here playing the victim as always. Tiffany, standing behind him with her arms crossed, added with venom. I knew you were after money, Susan. Always pretending to be good, self-sacrificing. Just waiting for the moment to steal everything. I looked at both of them. This son who had come out of my body. This woman I had welcomed into my family with open arms. And I felt nothing. No pain. No disappointment. Nothing. Are you finished? I asked calmly. We aren't finished. Are you going to withdraw that lawsuit right now or what? Robert, I interrupted him. Either you disinherit me or you stop speaking to me or you keep treating me the way you have treated me for years. Go ahead. You have nothing left to threaten me with because you already took everything you could take from me. My dignity, my self-esteem, my happiness. The only thing you have left to take is my life, and believe me, you are not going to get that either. At 1 in the afternoon, Grandma Eleanor arrived with Aunt Linda and Aunt Patty, the holy trinity of bitterness. You wretch, Grandma Eleanor shouted as soon as she walked in. After everything this family did for you, this is how you repay us, trying to steal my son's business. Your son stole $1,500,000 from the tax authorities, Grandma Eleanor. I am just helping the law do its job. Liar. My Bob is an honest man. Your Bob is a tax criminal and I have the proof. Aunt Linda stepped toward me, her finger pointed at my face. You were always resentful, always bitter, poisoning everything. My brother should have left you years ago. Strange, I replied calmly. Because for 32 years you were happy taking advantage of this bitter woman. Happy eating in my house. Happy using my labor. Happy insulting me to my face. But now that the bitter woman turns out to have teeth, you get scared. Brandon arrived at 3 in the afternoon. He didn't shout. He didn't insult me. He just looked at me with a coldness that froze my blood. Do you know what the worst part of all this is, Mom? It's not that you are suing Dad. It's not that you are destroying the family business. It is that you finally showed who you really are. A selfish, vengeful woman willing to destroy her own family for money. Interesting, I said, that you call me selfish. Tell me, Brandon, how much rent have you paid in the last 5 years you have lived here? How much have you contributed for food, electricity, water, internet? How many times have you washed your own clothes? But I am the selfish one. You are my mother. You are supposed to serve me until the day I die. And then disappear when I am no longer convenient for you. Let me be put into a nursing home like you planned so you could keep everything. He turned pale. How? I know everything, Brandon. The emails. The plans. The conversations with your siblings about the mom problem. Everything. Throughout the day, relatives arrived, friends of Robert Miller, business partners, all with the same message. Susan is crazy. Susan is vengeful. Susan is destroying the family. And I received all of them with the same calm, the same serenity. Because every insult, every threat, every attempt to make me feel guilty only confirmed that I was doing exactly the right thing. At 8 in the evening, when everyone finally left, Bob remained alone in the living room. Defeated. Aged 10 years in a single day. I approached him one last time. This is only the beginning, Bob. Tomorrow your accountant will discover that the corporate accounts are frozen. The day after tomorrow, suppliers will start calling asking about payments. In 1 week the scandal will be public. In 2 weeks you will probably be facing a formal criminal charge. And in 1 month, when the judge reviews my lawsuit and sees all the evidence, you will understand exactly how much it is going to cost you to have called me a bitch in my own house. Susan, please don't. There are no more please. There is no more negotiation. There are no more chances. You had 32 years of chances and you wasted every single one of them. I went up to my room, packed a suitcase with the essentials and left. I went to a nice hotel in downtown New York, a place where no one knew me, where no one judged me. That night, lying in a bed I didn't share with anyone, in a room that was completely mine, I slept better than I had in the last 10 years. Because at last, after so much time, I had stopped being a victim and become the protagonist of my own story. And the best was yet to come. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks in which I remained completely invisible to them. I didn't answer calls. I didn't reply to messages. I disappeared while the chaos unfolded exactly as I had planned. Bob had to hire an emergency tax lawyer when Mr. O'Reilly admitted that the situation was completely beyond his abilities. It cost him $25,000 just as a retainer. The corporate accounts remained frozen. Suppliers began demanding payment. 3 of his best clients canceled contracts because rumors of tax trouble spread like wildfire through the New York textile industry. I knew everything because my forensic accountant had contacts everywhere. He sent me daily reports. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. And I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. The preliminary divorce hearing was scheduled for January 20th at 10 in the morning. I arrived at the courthouse at 9:30. Pearl gray tailored suit, discreet heels, my hair pulled back into an elegant bun. Mr. Davis was waiting for me at the entrance with a confident smile. Ready to make history, Miss Susan. Ready to make justice. We entered the courtroom. Bob was already there with his new lawyer, Mr. Thornton, a man in his mid-50s with the face of a shark. Beside Bob were his 3 children. Jennifer had flown in from Los Angeles especially for that. Such dedication from someone who never had time for her mother. Bob looked at me with such pure hatred that I could almost feel it physically, but I also saw something else in his eyes. Fear. The judge entered. A man of about 60 years, wearing glasses with a serious expression. Judge Sullivan, known for being strict but fair. Good morning. We are here for the preliminary hearing in the contested divorce case. Docket number 2015-2025. Susan Miller versus Robert Miller. Counsel for the petitioner may proceed. Mr. Davis stood up, opened his briefcase and took out the first folder of evidence. Your Honor, my client is requesting a contested divorce on multiple grounds. Severe verbal abuse, proven infidelity, sustained psychological violence and economic dispossession. We submit the following evidence. For the next 30 minutes, my lawyer presented evidence after evidence. Photos of Bob with Ashley in restaurants in hotels. Receipts for the apartment he rented for their encounters. Bank statements showing personal expenses paid with corporate funds. Bob sank deeper and deeper into his chair with each document presented. But then came the part one had been waiting for. Additionally, Your Honor, we submit evidence of asset fraud. Mr. Miller modified the bylaws of Miller Logistics and Supply to reduce my client's ownership stake from the original 40% to just 5%, through documents that were never properly registered with the Secretary of State. Mr. Thornton, Bob's attorney, stood up immediately. Objection. Those documents were signed voluntarily by Ms. Susan at the time. She agreed to them. She was deceived, Mr. Davis interrupted. She was made to sign documents under the claim that they were routine administrative filings. My client didn't have independent legal representation at that time. And most importantly, those documents lack legal validity due to irregularities in their registration. Judge Sullivan reviewed the papers carefully. He spent several minutes reading, comparing dates and verifying stamps. Proceed, Mr. Davis. Thank you, Your Honor. Based on the original incorporation documents, my client is the lawful owner of 40% of Miller Logistics and Supply. In addition, for 32 years, my client worked for that company without receiving a formal salary, without benefits, without labor recognition. We are seeking compensation for the work performed, as well as formal recognition of her legitimate equity stake. Then Mr. Davis pulled out another folder. It was thicker, and when he opened it, I saw Bob turn completely pale. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that the defendant and his adult children plan to declare my client mentally incompetent, commit her to a nursing facility, and seize control of her assets. He placed an audio player on the table and pressed play. Bob's voice filled the courtroom. I have already talked to my children. They all agree. As soon as she signs the new will paperwork, we are going to declare her mentally incompetent. A couple of visits to the right psychiatrist, some diagnoses of senile dementia, and that is it. She gets institutionalized and I manage all her assets. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. My 3 children had their faces flushed red, staring at the floor. Bob looked as if he were about to vomit. Judge Sullivan stopped writing and looked directly at Bob. That is your voice, Mr. Miller. Bob didn't respond. His attorney touched his arm, urgently prompting him to answer. I was angry. I didn't mean it. You didn't mean planning to declare your wife incompetent in order to steal her assets? The judge's voice had an edge of steel. Continue, Mr. Davis. Your Honor, we also submit evidence that the defendant is currently under investigation by the tax authorities for alleged aggravated fraud. We have copies of fake invoices, transfers to shell companies, and diversion of funds totaling more than $1,500,000. Mr. Thornton attempted to object, but the judge silenced him with a gesture. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Thornton? The attorney looked defeated. He knew there was no possible defense against such an avalanche of evidence. Your Honor, we request a recess to consult with our client. Denied. The defense will have the opportunity to present its case at the next hearing. For now, based on the evidence presented, I issue the following precautionary measures. Over the next 10 minutes, the judge ordered a prohibition on the sale or transfer of assets, a restraining order prohibiting Bob from approaching within 100 yards of me, temporary spousal support in the amount of $8,000 monthly, to be paid by Bob for the duration of the proceedings. And best of all, the appointment of a court-appointed administrator for Miller Logistics and Supply, until the ownership structure was fully clarified. When Judge Sullivan finished, Bob finally exploded. This is an injustice. She is stealing from me. I worked 32 years to build that business, and this witch wants to take it from me. Mr. Miller, the judge said, striking his gavel. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. You are being afforded full due process. If you disagree with these measures, present evidence at the next hearing. Until then, remain silent. Bob collapsed into his chair, defeated. His children looked at him with a mixture of shame and panic. Jennifer had tears in her eyes, not from sadness for me, but from fear of what all this meant for her inheritance. This session is adjourned. Next hearing in 30 days. We left the courthouse. On the courthouse steps, Bob caught up with me. His attorney tried to stop him, but he pushed past. Susan, please, we can fix this. It does not have to be this way. We can negotiate. We can. No. My voice was firm, without a trace of doubt. There is no negotiation. No. After 32 years, not after New Year's Eve, not after planning to declare me insane to rob me. No, Bob, it is over. But you are going to destroy your own children. The business is their future, their inheritance. Their inheritance? I repeated slowly. How interesting that you are suddenly worried about them now. Where was that concern when you were planning to have me declared incompetent? Where was it when you called me a bitch in front of your entire family? Where was it when your children said I was a burden that needed to be eliminated? Robert Jr. stepped closer, his face red with rage. Mom, enough. You have already proven your point. Now stop this before it is too late. I looked at him. This son who had grown inside my body. This man who resembled his father so deeply in all the worst ways. No, my son. What is too late is your chance to treat me like a human being. You had 32 years. You wasted them. Now live with the consequences. Jennifer approached me crying. Mom, please. We are your family, your blood. You cannot do this to us. You are not my family, Jennifer. Family does not treat its own this way. Family does not plan to have its mother declared insane in order to rob her. You are strangers who happen to share my last name. Nothing more. Brandon, the only one who had said nothing, finally spoke. You're going to regret this. You are going to end up alone, bitter, with no one. I smiled. A genuine smile that probably unsettled them more than anything else. Brandon, I was already alone. I was already bitter. The difference is that now I am alone by choice, not by abandonment. And the bitterness is fading with every step I take away from you. I turned and walked toward the car where Mr. Davis was waiting for me. Behind me I heard shouting, pleading, threats. I didn't turn around even once. Inside the car he looked at me with respect. Miss Susan, that was masterful. The judge is clearly on our side. The next hearing is a mere formality. We have already won. No, I corrected him. I have already won. And I didn't win the money or the business. I won something far more valuable. I got my dignity back. That afternoon, back at my hotel, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Ashley, Bob's former mistress. Miss Susan, I just wanted you to know something. Bob called me. He offered me money to say that I falsified the recordings, that you paid me to lie. Why are you telling me this? Because when I said no, he threatened me. He said that if I didn't cooperate, he would ruin my life. And that is when I understood that you were right about him. He is a monster. A monster who hides very well who he really is. Thank you for calling, Ashley. No, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for showing me that monsters don't deserve a single second more of our time. I hung up and looked out the hotel window. The sun was setting over New York, painting the sky orange and pink, and for the first time in 32 years I felt completely free. 6 months have passed since that hearing. 6 months that changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. The divorce was finalized in March. The judge ruled in my favor on absolutely everything. I was awarded 50% of the marital assets, which included the house where I had lived for 32 years. Bob had to buy out my share or sell it. He chose to sell. He could not stand the idea of me owning something he believed was his. I was also legally recognized as the owner of 40% of Miller Logistics and Supply. Bob tried to appeal, but with the court-appointed administrator documenting every irregularity he uncovered, he had no chance. We ultimately reached a settlement. He bought out my stake for $2,500,000. $2,500,000 that were added to the $2 million from my father's inheritance. $4,500,000. That was my new reality. The IRS concluded its investigation. Bob faced charges for tax fraud. He reached an agreement with the authorities to pay a massive fine and back taxes, thus avoiding prison. But the scandal destroyed his reputation in the New York textile industry. He lost 60% of his clients. He had to close 2 of his 4 warehouses. My children tried to contact me for months. Calls, messages, emails. They even showed up at my new apartment, a beautiful penthouse in the Upper East Side that I bought with my own money. I didn't open the door. Jennifer eventually wrote me a letter. A long letter asking for forgiveness, saying she understood my pain, begging me to give her a chance to rebuild our relationship. I read it once and then put it away in a drawer. Maybe one day I will be ready to forgive. Maybe one day I will be able to look at her without feeling that mix of sadness and relief. But that day isn't today. Robert Jr. lost his job in the family business when Bob had to cut staff. I heard through others that he and Tiffany are having marital problems. Apparently, when the money runs out, love evaporates too. Brandon finally had to get a job, rent his own apartment, learn to cook, wash his clothes, pay his bills. All the things I used to do for him while he called me useless. Grandma Eleanor suffered a mild heart attack in April. I heard that she now lives with Aunt Linda, because Bob can no longer afford to keep her in his house with a full-time housekeeper. I wonder if Aunt Linda treats her with the same devotion she expected from me. I doubt it. As for me, I returned to Buffalo, New York, my hometown. I bought a beautiful house near the historic district with a garden and a fountain full of light and space. A house that is completely mine, where no one yells at me, where no one insults me, where no one expects me to serve and clean. I opened a small accounting advisory business for women entrepreneurs. I use my decades of experience to help other women understand their finances, protect themselves legally, and avoid making the mistakes I made. It is fulfilling in ways I never experienced in Bob's business. I reconnected with friends from my youth, friends I had abandoned when I got married and moved to New York. We go out to eat, we go to the movies, we travel together. For the first time in decades, I have a social life that does not revolve around serving my husband's family. 2 weeks ago, I turned 64. My friends organized a surprise party for me. There were flowers, music, laughter, genuine hugs. They sang happy birthday. They gave me gifts chosen especially for me. And when I blew out the candles on my cake, I didn't make a wish because at last I no longer need to wish for anything. I have everything I need. This morning, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Bob. Susan, I need to talk to you, please. It is about something important. I didn't respond. I blocked the number because there is nothing Bob can say that I need to hear anymore. That chapter of my life is closed. Filed away somewhere in my memory where it can no longer hurt me. Sometimes, when I am sitting in the garden of my house in the afternoons, having tea and reading a book, I wonder what my life would have been like if I had had the courage to leave earlier. If I had said, enough, at 30, at 40, at 50. But then I remember something my lawyer told me after the final divorce hearing. Miss Susan, the right moment is when you decide it is the right moment. Not before, not after. You did what you had to do when you were ready to do it. He was right. Maybe I needed to live those 32 years of hell to appreciate this new life of peace. Maybe I needed to hit rock bottom to find the strength to get back up. Maybe I needed to lose everything to discover that, in truth, I had never had anything that was truly worth keeping. Now I am 64 years old. Some would say I started late, that I wasted my youth, that I lost the best years of my life. But I don't see it that way. I see that I have, with luck, 20 or 30 more years of life. And those years are going to be completely mine. They are going to be years of dignity, of respect, of peace. They are going to be years in which I decide what I do when I do it and with whom I do it. And that isn't losing. That is winning. If you are listening to me and going through something similar, if there is someone in your life who makes you feel small, invisible, useless, I want you to know something. You are not alone. And it is never, never too late to reclaim your life. It does not matter if you are 40, 50, 60, or 70 years old. It does not matter if you have spent 10 or 40 years in a toxic relationship. It does not matter if you have money or not. What matters is that you matter. Your dignity matters. Your peace of mind matters. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to take that away from you. It took me 32 years to learn it. I hope you don't take as long as I did. And if you decide to take that step, if you decide to say, enough, if you decide to reclaim your life, I want you to remember something. Fear is normal, guilt is normal, doubt is normal. But on the other side of that fear, that guilt, that doubt, is the version of you that you deserve to be. It is the life you deserve to live. It is worth it. I promise you. It is absolutely worth it. Now, if you like this story, if you felt identified with it, if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it. Give it a like. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of women who said, enough. And above all, leave your story in the comments. Tell me what you are living through. Tell me what you decided to do. Because you are not alone. You are never alone. And remember, you're not old. You are not useless. You are not invisible. You are a woman with a whole life ahead of you. A life that is yours and yours alone. And no one can take it from you. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being here. And thank you for reminding me that my story, as painful as it was, can help someone else find their way to freedom. Until then, take care of yourself, value yourself, and never, ever let anyone dim your light. See you in the next story.